reminding you about some of the issues in discipline. Well, first of all, discipline is taking the time to train your children to live within healthy boundaries. Boundaries that are firm, but boundaries that are fair. Putting boundaries in life. Ian Grant, who's from Parenting Incorporation, wrote a book about fathers and sons and relationship about fathers and sons. And he says that when we are consistent with reinforcing the boundaries for our children in terms of their behaviour, we will do ourselves and our children a great favour. Because children like to know the boundaries. They like to know what is acceptable or unacceptable. They like to know how far they can go or not go in terms of their behaviour. It gives them a great sense of actual security. And you talk to kids who have got no kind of firm, consistent boundaries, and there's a sense of neglect in their lives. They feel like their parents didn't love them or care enough about them to actually teach them how they are to behave and how, teach them manners or good habits. It's like they've been neglected, and so their boundaries are all over the place. And so there's a great sense of insecurity sometimes in the lives of kids like that. So boundaries are really important. Now, all our boundaries may be slightly different because the parents that you had were different than my parents. And so some parents were stricter with boundaries, some of them more flexible with boundaries, and that's okay. As long as for your children the boundaries are clear, they understand them, and they understand the consequences if the boundaries, if they push the boundaries or go beyond the boundaries. They understand what the consequences are with those boundaries. So that boundaries are important. Secondly, discipline has the element of punishment in it. Children need to know that if they break the boundaries, that there will be consequences if they push across the boundaries or have you on too often. Now, when you read the book of Proverbs, it raises this whole issue of physical discipline. You know, the old rod thing. It says in Proverbs 13, those who spare the rod hate their children. 29:15, the rod of correction imparts wisdom. The whole use of physical kind of punishment, you know, the smack, or in my day at high school it was the old cane, you know, across the backside, you know. Some of you with grey hairs remember those good old days, you know, the cane. Physical punishment is a big issue in our society today because it's not only frowned upon, but you actually can be taken to court if you use physical punishment, about, you know, what they say is inappropriate physical punishment. Now, for many of you, you may never have had physical punishment, and in your family, you may never have had to use physical punishment for your children because, you know, either because of your parental skills or because your kids were, you know, just good phlegmatic kids, you know, well behaved, you know, great to bring up, all the rest of it. But I kind of have a quandary with the whole physical discipline kind of issue because I think it actually requires a high degree of parenting skills to bring our children up without the use of physical discipline. Especially if you've got strong-willed, choleric kids who want to be in control, you know, and they will confront you about who's in control every day and every minute of the day. You know, it's like you have to battle to get them to bed, you have to battle to get them out of bed, you have to battle them, you know, because they want to be in control of everything. You know, and if you as a parent don't have a high degree of parenting skills, man, I feel for parents in that situation. You know, because I think, how do they handle strong-willed kids if there's no, you know, now look, I just want to remind you, smack, you know, keep in line here. It takes a good level of parenting skills to actually bring your kids up and keep the boundaries firm and strong. So I've always got a bit of a quandary about that thing. I know some of the more of us grey-haired people think, well, what's wrong with a good smack occasionally, you know, all that kind of stuff to keep the boundaries. But, you know, the modern day thing is you can use other means of discipline to keep the boundaries. But it does require good parenting skills to do that. Anyway, that's that one. I'd still leave it hanging in the air, but you know my quandary. So, number 3, discipline is teaching our children how they need to behave. How they need to behave in your family, how they need to behave in school, how they need to behave in the supermarket. Especially when you've got a 3-year-old and they want the chocolates, and they throw a wobbly on the floor, How to behave. That's the whole thing about teaching and training. And you need to start right with the basic things, don't you? Right when they're little young, you can teach them the very basic things, good manners and all the rest of it. I'm really so fascinated to watch my daughters with their children and how they are teaching and training their children. And our daughter at Whangaprao's got a little grandson. He's a lovely little boy, 2 years old. And I'm absolutely intrigued and fascinated. Before he could talk, she taught him how to say thank you and please. Matthew, what do you say? And he'd go like this. You know what that means? Please. Well, thank you. She taught him sign language. So before he could even talk, he was saying please. Now, you can look at some families, they never taught the kids to say please or thank you. That's just a basic thing, isn't it? Don and I had our little grandson for 2 days this week at home, and he's got a cough. And here's this little hand goes up. When he coughs, daughters taught him, you put your hand in front of your mouth. Diane reckons that he can teach his grandfather a few manners. I'm fascinated. Here's this little boy with his little hand, coughing away. And you can teach your kids incredible amount of manners and behaviour from a very, very young age. And that's part of your responsibility as parents, is that you teach your children how to behave in life and set the boundaries so that they keep to that behaviour. Fourthly, children who've been brought up with good discipline will have a great foundation in their adult life to be able to exercise self-discipline. If you have learnt in your growing up years to obey the discipline, the boundaries, the rules, the commands that your parents had in your family, you will have learnt about boundaries. And when it comes to you being free as an adult, those boundaries that you learned as a child, imposed boundaries, give you an ability when you get as an adult to exercise your own inner boundaries as an adult. If you've been brought up as a person who did not have a lot of boundaries in your life as a child, and your parents taught you about obeying boundaries, you will find that as you get up and as an adult that it's actually difficult to exercise self-discipline and impose your own inner boundaries on your behaviour. It's like you just find it difficult to do that. I remember years ago when we were at Glenville, we had a lady who was brought up on a kind of a hippie kind of lifestyle where there was, she didn't really have too much boundaries around her life. When she became a Christian, she found it incredibly difficult because she found it hard to impose on herself or exercise self-discipline in her own life and try to do what she wanted to do. I remember saying we had a street ministry for street kids at one stage, and she said to us one day, I really feel for those kids because those kids out there have been neglected by their parents and they don't understand about boundaries. When they become Christians, they're going to find it extremely difficult. Or even when they become adults, they become extremely difficult because they don't know how to exercise self-discipline because they've had no boundaries in their life. So you're teaching your children about boundaries and obeying kind of the rules and the commands, as it were, that you give to them, their behaviour, actually helps them as an adult to exercise their own self-control and self-discipline. Fifthly, disciplining children requires a balance between loving your kids and discipline. Proverbs 13:24b says, "Those who love their children are careful to discipline them." And let me quote to you from James Dobson's book, Dare to Discipline, which is an old book now, but he quotes a psychologist who said this: "The greatest social disaster of this century, which is now the last century, is the belief that abundant love makes discipline unnecessary. And James Dobson goes on to say this: respectful and responsible children result from